You are listening to GeekFest Rants on the IC Robots Radio Network.
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all. So say we all.
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
Finally, here we go.
Good evening, Peter.
Whoa!
You have 576 possible web shooter combinations.
That is awesome. I can keep that suit?
Yeah, doesn't fit me.
When's our next retreat?
What, next mission? We'll call you. All right?
It's not a hug. I'm just grabbing the door for you.
We're not there yet.
All right, kid. Good luck out there.
Hey, Peter. You coming tonight? I can tonight. I got the Stark internship. What's up, guys? Mr. Stark, here's my report for tonight. I stopped the Grand Theft bicycle. Hey, could you do me a favor? Hold on to that. Is this anybody's bike? Oh, I helped this old lady and she bought me a churro. So, that was nice. I just feel like I could be doing more. Wait a minute. You guys aren't the real Avengers. Hulk gives it away. New move I'm working on? Not bad. Oh, God, this feels so strange. These weapons are crazy dangerous.
Listen, Peter, there are people who handle this sort of thing. Can't you just be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?
Let go of me! Let go of me!
Activating parachute.
The world's changing, boys.
It's time we change, too.
This is my chance to prove myself.
We have a Spanish quiz.
You gotta get better at this part of the job.
I don't understand. Oh, I'm intimidated. Oh, hey, guys.
Our friends up there! Hey, where are you going? What are you hiding, Peter? I'm just kidding, I don't care. Bye.
There's a ton of other subsystems in here, but they're all disabled by the training wheels protocol.
I'm sick of Mr. Stark treating me like a kid.
But you are a kid.
Yeah, a kid who can stop a bus with his bare hands.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rant. My name is Carlos Perron, and today we are going to be hitting a brand new movie, Spider-Man Homecoming. Very anxiously expected new Marvel film. This is Sony Marvel, the collaboration that started a little bit while back with Civil War. This is Spider-Man getting his own new reboot film. We've recently watched it. I have Kyle joining me today, and we're going to both talk about it. And I'm going to, as usual, go over the Star Wars connections. There's a lot of little Star Wars toy cameos in this particular film. Is it a hit? Is it another feather in Marvel's cap? You know, is this a hit for Sony too? You'll find out. I'm also going to be talking about poster collecting, especially the posters that I own. Recently, I started to unearth my old posters and displaying them. And the first one we're going to hit today is going to be the re-release of Raiders of the Lost Ark. We're going to talk about that poster and its history. And speaking of collecting, we are also going to revisit, or more like continue, with our Kenner Star Wars, specifically Return of the Jedi action figure collection. This time we're going to go over the 65 card backs all the way to the Jedi line. We finally reached Return of the Jedi, and we'll go over some of those figures that came in that groundbreaking wave of action figures and how much we love them. So let's start with Spider-Man Homecoming, and as usual, spoilers aplenty. Here we go.
What did I teach you?
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
You will not let
You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you.
Can you dig it?
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
That spawn of Satan.
Oh, really?
The Force will be with you, always.
On today's movie, we are joined by Kyle, who happened to have seen Spider-Man Homecoming with us last week. We all went, even my wife and my daughter. We all gave it a shot because, you know, this type of movie is not as dark as some of the other more recent Marvel films. And I would even kind of place it I would say, you know, above the Guardians / Ant-Man type of Marvel film and below, obviously, the Avengers and, you know, the more serious Marvel films. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. And one of the things about this film that, you know, we kind of knew it was coming for a long time was that this whole thing started when Marvel and Sony decided to share, I guess, the profits and the rights and kind of start blending some of their characters because Sony has the rights to Spider-Man.
The deal that we know so far based on the movies that have come out was like Sony got, I believe, a little bit of profits from Civil War for including Spider-Man, but in this case, Marvel funded and shot the movie for Homecoming, and then Sony's getting all the money from the movie, but Marvel's getting all the money from all the like the toys and shirts and stuff.
Right. The bottom line is that not only are they going to continue with Spider-Man films because this is so far very successful, but they're also going to be able to keep him, you know, as a contributing character in some of these other Marvel films.
Yeah, so supposedly right now the deal that they have with specifically Tom Holland's Spider-Man, they have, I believe, after this movie, they have 5 more left. They have Avengers 3 and Avengers 4, and then they have, I believe, 2 or 3 more Spider-Man movies after that.
Jeez. Well, let's talk a little bit about this particular movie. Now, Kyle mentioned, I believe, that we did get a preview, in a way, of Spider-Man when we saw Civil War. So we got to watch a little bit of the beginning of how they introduce him, you know, in the mix. This is his standalone film, and they chose a different route this time as opposed to the previous 2 Spider-Man films. We are no longer dealing with an origin story from the very, very, very beginning. In other words, we are getting to see him kind of in the beginning of his stages of figuring out how things work and stuff, especially since he is aligned with Tony Stark. He's kind of mentoring him in a way. Mm-hmm. He kind of started it doing, I guess, during the Civil War time. And now he's more involved with him. He gives him a different suit that has extra abilities that, as far as the films go, we've never seen before.
Yeah, in the comics, a lot of those are there. Like in the comics, he has like he can have these like web boats, like everything. I mean, those are a little over the top, but they kind of dip into that in the movie with like the electric webs and the stuff like that.
Well, Spider-Man's been around for such a long time that they have got, you know, they've invented just about every conceivable thing to make him different, you know, years after years after years. Yeah. But with film, we've never gone that far with him. So even though you don't see the fact that he was bitten by a spider and then, you know, his powers start coming through and, you know, the tragedy with Uncle Ben and all that stuff, we are not seeing any of that. That's already happened. Yeah. Maybe they'll do a flashback at some point.
They barely acknowledge it. The only thing they really say is like, oh, I don't want to make Aunt May upset. She's already had so much to deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
And here we're this movie is super, super tied into the Avengers. I mean, if you think about it, the entire film is about the aftermath of Avenger-related events.
Yeah, the beginning, they open up with, like, they're rebuilding Stark Tower after the Battle of New York, and you see all the, like, they're digging up all the alien tech and stuff.
Yeah. The lead bad guy in this one is the Vulture, which, again, we've never seen him before in film form. This character is played by Michael Keaton, who has been having somewhat of a resurgence over the last couple of years. Everything, I think, once he did Birdman, which very ironically, he's kind of playing something, I don't want to say similar, but it's in the vein of a gigantic flying bird type of thing. And it's funny because when he did Birdman, the rumor started circulating that, hey, wouldn't he be a good bad guy for, I think it might have been Spider-Man, because the deal was kind of in the works around that time.
Yeah, they were talking about him being in Spider-Man. Originally, people were saying, oh, maybe he's going to play the Green Goblin, but then everyone's like, wait, because of Birdman, he'll be Vulture, and I guess that's
exactly what
happened, yeah.
But Kyle, why don't you tell us a little bit about the other let's start with the other bad guys, because they sprinkled a couple of other bad guys and even tease some other bad guys.
There's like, based on what my notes here, there's 4 total bad guys that 5 technically.
But they're more minor. They're not like in the past where you had 2 equally important bad guys.
And I kind of like this because these villains are more like street villains, really. Like, and Spider-Man is friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, it's street. He's a street hero. He's like Daredevil, basically, only more popular. That's the thing. So the other villains, we have Vulture,
right?
But we also have the Shocker, which we get 2 different actors and playing 2 different characters that take up the mantle. I forget what one of them. The first one, I forget who that one was, but the second one is Herman Schultz, which is the original Shocker from the comics. His costume, he has the brown and yellow. He doesn't have a mask, unfortunately. Some of the toys, actually, they show him having a mask, but in the movie, he doesn't have a mask. And there was like some promo art where they show him having a mask, but they never did. Maybe it was like, I remember with Avengers, they originally had Hawkeye with glasses, with sunglasses in the promotional art for everything, but they never had that in the movie. But he also has like the shock glove that he has. It's actually a modified version of Crossbones' like punching glove, like power fist from Civil War that you see he has.
Right, but like I said before, these are not lead characters. They're kind of the thugs of the bad guy.
And then also another one of the thugs of the bad guy is the Tinkerer, who he's been in like the really, really original comics, and he's like a big guy for like a lot of the smaller villains. They all try to buy tech from him because he makes all these things.
But they don't kind of like really dress up these bad guys.
Like
they don't give them costumes or anything. They're just bad guys who either have a special weapon that they use, or like the Tinkerer. He just likes to build
the Tinkerer, things. They don't even call him the Tinkerer, but I forget what his actual name was, but they refer to him by his actual comic book name. And then also we have briefly is Prowler, played by Donald Glover, who his real name is Aaron Davis. And like the Prowler he's kind of an anti-hero in the way, because like he starts out as a cat burglar, but then he kind of becomes a hero in certain ways. And then in the Ultimate Universe, he's just a straight up cat burglar, but he's not a total jerk. Like he's a complicated bad guy. And half the time he's not even a bad guy.
Now, let's just talk a little bit about Donald Glover, because the reason, I imagine, the only reason that he's in this film is because for a long time, through like back channels, when they rebooted Spider-Man so many times, he, I think, through back channels, was campaigning to be able to be the next Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So things have gone as far as, certain comic books were created that were kind of like, well, maybe he can play this type of Spider-Man or that type of Spider-Man. And I've known people, just like there are people that, when you hear about Doctor Who possibly having a female lead, they will like, I'm never watching the show again. Or if James Bond, all of a sudden they have a non-English, white guy, they're like, I'm never watching the show again. But I've known people that are the same way about Spider-Man. If you don't have a Peter Parker looking kid, they're like, I am done with Spider-Man.
Well, the thing that kind of connects to this is that Aaron Davis's nephew is Miles Morales.
Which brings us back to the comic.
He's the Spider-Man that, when in the Ultimate Universe, Spider-Man dies and he takes over the mantle, and he's an African-American / Hispanic kid who's just growing up, and he gets bit by a radioactive spider too, and he becomes Spider-Man. And it looks like they're setting that up.
They're giving you more than enough hints that something's going to happen in the future. And again, you don't use this actor randomly.
Yeah, I would definitely be willing to see like Miles Morales. He's a cool character from the comics, and
here he's not like we said earlier, we have lots of spoilers here. He is not a direct bad guy in this film. He's kind of like somebody who is trying to buy tech from one of the bad guys, but we don't know exactly why.
Yeah, and he says he's like, I don't want any trouble in my neighborhood though from these guys. They're getting too rowdy, so And
Like
that's why
he's trying to do it to save or to protect his nephew or something like that.
Well, yeah, he's trying to make money. He's buying it, so I guess either to resell it or just to have it as protection.
Get it off the streets, maybe, or something like that.
Well, that's what he told Spider-Man afterward. Because he realized that these people are really getting too big, and that they could be like walking into his neighborhood.
So we have another bad guy that appears on the boat scene, and then later at the end, and it gives us a better idea of who he's probably going to be.
Well, who he is, it's Scorpion, Mac Gargan. He's another Spider-Man villain that we've seen a lot. In the comics, he has a mechanical tail that like acts as a scorpion tail. In the comics, he was actually hired by J. Jonah Jameson to kill Spider-Man because J. Jonah Jameson hated Spider-Man. But we don't actually see him in this movie.
Oh, that's right, because he's still in high school.
Yeah, so
he hasn't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah.
And I imagine that, again, depending on how they go with the film, if it is the Scorpion that's coming up in the future, will it most likely be some kind of mechanical device? Will it be kind of like a Doc Ock type of thing that comes from the body? Who knows? I don't know which way they're going to go, because obviously the Vulture is not exactly, from what we've seen, the comic Vulture is not exactly the mechanical monster that this guy can attach himself to.
The comic Vulture is just a guy in a green feather suit.
It's like Big Bird, except he's green.
But yeah, and the scene at the end that we see, the end tag scene with him meeting with the Vulture, it kind of sets up possibly Sinister Six, because he mentions that he has a bunch of friends and they'd like to stick it to Spider-Man. So that's kind of interesting, because there's still rumors that Sony is developing their own Sinister Six movie, and if they are doing that, then what are they doing with this? Because either they're going to have two Sinister Six movies with different members, or...
Well, again, I to bring back the same person I remember that told me about that, that he would never accept another Spider-Man. He also told me there is never going to be a Sinister Six movie, and I don't know, things are... things are changing.
The thing is Sony is... Literally, they had something so good with this, and I hope that they realize from Spider-Man Homecoming that they really can't afford to not be connected to the MCU, because they were talking about Venom being its own thing without the MCU, without Spider-Man, and that's ridiculous. I mean...
hold on a second. Let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Sinister Six was announced back when Andrew Garfield had first joined
they announced
Spider-Man.
that. There were rumors of a Aunt May secret spy spin-off movie. There was the Black Cat movie with Silver Sable.
And then the second Spider-Man film came out with Electro. I forget the name of that
and then
one.
that tanked.
And that just destroyed that entire franchise.
Because they literally just used that movie to build other movies with. There was no plot other than to set up other plots. That was all it was.
And that killed it. But now with this, not even this, with Civil War bringing Spider-Man and kind of testing the waters, and it worked very well. This one now as a solo project, even though it is completely attached to the Marvel Universe in terms of the story, continues that way. But here we also get a lot of school characters that we might have seen in other movies, but not on some. He has a whole bunch of other friends and team members from the science, math, whatever team he belongs to.
Like his main friend is Ned Leeds in this. They kind of really took a lot of different characters to make this.
He's the guy that keeps saying, I want to be like the voice in your head, the computer guy. And it's funny because at the end he gets to do that.
Well, because his name is Ned Leeds. Ned Leeds is actually a reporter that worked for the Daily Bugle with Parker.
Oh.
And actually, Ned Leeds becomes the Hobgoblin, who's basically the fourth incarnation of the Green Goblin, which is it's ridiculous.
It doesn't matter because obviously they don't follow everything to the letter.
I don't think they're going to do that.
Who
with
knows
him,
which
though.
way they're going to go?
But then they also kind of took, because Harry Osborn was Spider-Man's best friend, and they kind of took that. He takes that position, but
we didn't see him in this one.
We didn't see Harry Osborn.
But we saw Flash. What's his nose?
Yeah, Flash. But Flash is instead they just made him some.
Just
nerd,
like a rich, jerky nerd, like a jerky rich guy who's always picking on Peter.
Yeah, and they made him more of like a real down to earth person instead of some like jock.
Right, the typical bully, type of guy.
Yeah, and also back to Oscorp, there was zero mention of Oscorp.
No, that's right.
Norman Osborn, nothing, which I thought was a little bit odd. I mean, I know they're trying to keep away from them because they used them so much in the other movies, but they could at least acknowledge that they exist.
Well, this is the first film They can sprinkle
like
it out.
I remember back when they were doing like the Amazing Spider-Man and stuff, they actually did screen tests and stuff. They were going to add the Oscorp building in the New York skyline during Avengers. They actually did like digital renderings for it, but Sony was like, you know what, never mind, this is a bad idea, don't do it. And then they ended up making more bad ideas.
Again, this is the beginning. When the new Batman films started coming out in terms of Batman versus Superman and some of that stuff, you know, we knew that sooner or later they were going to bring the Joker. They weren't just going to bring him up first.
Yeah.
Here, same thing. Eventually, you are going to have the Green Goblin in some shape or form meet up with Spider-Man and Peter Parker and all that thing. But they don't want to do it on the first run. You know, that's kind of like you don't want to just blow off your first major character and then just have him disappear for the next 3 or 4 films.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk a little bit about the many Marvel connections in this film? Off the bat, one of the things that we saw the film in 3D, which was pretty cool, you know, no big deal. The Marvel opening, the Marvel logo is different because it's Spider-Man related, because it's also a Sony picture.
Yeah.
And the music...
They were slapping Sony all over it.
Yeah. And the music is the old animated theme, Spider-Man theme song.
I didn't think of that.
Played in a classical score type of thing. And I'm like giggling through it because I'm like, wow, they actually worked it into the film
nice.
in a really cool way.
That was a really nice touch.
So let's talk about the Marvel connections. The fact that the Vulture is basically a guy who's like cleaning up the mess of
he was part
the
of
attack.
Damage control.
Right, he's there cleaning up, picking up the garbage and the tech and everything.
Well, no, he wasn't part of Damage Control. He was just a regular...
a city guy.
Yeah, but Damage Control took over for the project.
Right, so he gets angry at them and he starts collecting his own stuff. And years later, he's now like an arms dealer of tech.
Yeah.
And he's got his crew of guys that used to, I guess, work for him as part of the city. Yeah. And it's funny, one of the guys you mentioned... The second I saw him, I don't know if it was the Tinkerer or the other guy.
It was a Shocker, yeah.
It's a fake Tom Hardy.
Yeah. They say that in the video.
And I remember because I'm watching it, I'm like, that guy looks like the guy from Prometheus, who looks like the guy from Tom Hardy.
He's just like a slightly tanner.
And they shaved his head. I think they shaved his head and they gave him a full, huge beard. Yeah, I'm like, no, that's like that.
Now he looks like Tom Hardy at the Golden Globe premiere.
It's like I love beard. It's almost Tom Hardy. I love him. He's great. I hope that we see him again at some point. Yeah, so we have that connection. Obviously, the Tony Stark connection, it's huge to the point where even before this movie came out, they've been kind of retconning a scene from, what was it, Avengers?
From Iron Man 2.
Was that Iron Man 2?
Yeah, Iron Man 2.
Where the little kid is watching Iron Man, and he's wearing the mask, and he's kind of waving at him or whatever. And they're saying now that was Peter Parker.
Yeah, because there was the battle at the end with the drones, and all the people are running, but the kid is staying there, and he's like, I can beat him up with my toy arc reactor.
And
then Iron Man flips behind him, he's like, and he shoots the drone. He's like, oh, nice shot, kid, and he flies away.
Yeah, obviously You know what? It's cute. There's no way in hell they did that on purpose.
And you actually see in the first, I think it's actually one of the first shots of the movie when you see Peter with his camera, is when he's driving along the highway. They pass by the World's Fair where that scene took place.
Well, that's the other thing. They do this thing in the beginning where Peter is shooting like a video of a mission he's about to go into.
Which is the one from Civil War.
Right, and they kind of cut almost back and forth a little bit between the video he's shooting that he's going to then upload into YouTube, which we do see him doing that later, and they kind of intercut it with scenes of that airport fight, which was really cool how they worked that out.
Yeah. And then he kind of, when he's talking to Ned, Ned's like freaking out. He's like, oh, you're Spider-Man. And then, so like once in a while he'll drop like you see Captain America on the screen for the...
he's doing those PSAs.
The PSAs. And then he's like, I stole his shield. And he's like, oh...
Yeah, I like the relationship with his friend and how he's all gushing over everything that's anything having to do with the Avengers. The other thing is that this movie does not let you forget not only that Sony is the parent company here, but that Disney is also involved because it's Star Wars connection. Yeah. You do see them build, and you saw this in the trailer, they're building a Death Star Lego.
Yeah, and
he drops it and smashes it to bits.
Yeah, and it's funny that Peter Parker likes Star Wars in this movie because in the comics, he actually it's kind of been like hinted at and kind of said that he doesn't actually like Star Wars. Like, he thinks it's ridiculous.
Well, it's probably, I have a feeling it's because of the parent studio. They wanted to make, not only do you see that, but I was, the only thing I was watching during those scenes are the toys on his shelf. And I saw a hanging X-Wing fighter, or a vintage.
Yeah, there's the
and
AT-AT.
there's an AT-AT that seems to be missing some pieces.
Yeah, and then there's some of the 6-inch figures. Yeah.
Well, not so much a 6-inch. I saw original
We actually
Kenner.
have the 6-inch this figure. It was on the corner of the shelf.
But I saw Kenner original figures back on the shelf.
Yeah.
I saw them as clear as day. I'm trying to find them on the internet if somebody did a screen grab yet, or if somebody interviewed somebody about what props are out there.
Well, when the Blu-ray comes out, we can pause it.
Yeah, and sooner or later somebody's going to do an article or somebody's going to ask an interview and figure that out. Let's talk a little more about that suit, because part of the story involves him using the suit and then using it without permission and doing certain things without permission, and Tony gets pissed and takes it away from him. But that suit can do so many things, to the point where you even have a voice of the computer, I guess, that's running the suit, talking to him, almost like Jarvis would talk to Tony.
Yeah, the actress is Jennifer Connelly, and she's actually married to Paul Bettany, who plays the Vision.
Yeah, and she was also in the first Hulk film.
Yeah, I actually never watched that movie.
Oh,
I saw the end, I think, and I was like, what the heck? This isn't Hulk.
It's a little rough to watch, but you should watch it just to get it over with.
All I saw was like sand, like this guy turning into sand, and like that's all I remember. I was like 6 or something. I don't remember. I saw the end of it. Like, you were watching it. I think you were sitting down watching it, and I was just walked in there. I'm like, he's sand.
Yeah, I don't remember that part.
And it's like his Bruce and his father or something. I don't know.
Oh, because he's this creature. Yeah, he's another one of these crazy
so weird.
monster villains. Now, let's talk a little bit about the hook, the twist that I wasn't expecting, because I don't read the comics, I have no idea if this is part of the comics or not.
I don't think this was in the comics.
His love interest in this film is not Mary Jane. It's another girl that apparently is a natural character.
She's in the comics. She's actually Peter Parker's first crush, and she appears, I think, in issue 4, I think, of the original run of Spider-Man, like the first run. I think it was issue 4, yeah. But in this movie, it turns out, like, the twist is that Adrian Toomes, who's the Vulture, is actually her father.
Right. Obviously, it's her stepfather or adoptive father, because she's black and he's Michael Keaton.
He's Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton's not black. But they never really explained that, and that's kind of good in a way, because you know what? You don't always have to explain, well, you see, I fell in love with this girl that wasn't exactly like me. And it's like, no, you don't have to explain it. Just keep going.
But that was definitely not in the comics at all.
Right. But later, we find out that one of the girls of Peter's group, especially of that debate team or whatever team they're doing,
Michelle.
She has a different name, but then she gives her initials.
Yeah, her full name is Michelle Jones, and her initials are MJ.
So it's like, oh, okay. So we're kind of like, oh, I guess that's where we're going with that.
So here's the thing. We don't know if maybe they're going to have Mary Jane down the line, or if this is going to be the MCU version of Mary Jane, and they're going to change the character, because we've seen Mary Jane so many times before. So
now let me kind of throw a little bit of a political thing here, because I haven't seen this happen yet, and I'll be curious if it happens, because it happened with Star Wars. With Star Wars, The Force Awakens and Rogue One, there were a lot of grumblings from certain political leaning people that why do they have to have so many women? Why does there have to be a black guy as the lead? Why, why, all this stuff. Here, this movie is very diverse. Yes. You have characters that I've never seen. They're all over the place.
Like Peter's the only white guy in his friend group.
Pretty much. I mean, again, now keep in mind, you're not in Kentucky. You're in New York City.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to see 100% white cast? You make the film take place in Kentucky. This is New York City. And every other character is a different ethnicity here, which is kind of like, not only that, but they don't have to, like I mentioned earlier, they don't have to explain it. They don't have to give you a reason for it.
It's just a natural.
Even his principal is another weird Easter egg in the film, because his principal is the descendant, I guess, of the guy from Captain America.
Yeah, he was one of the Howling Commandos.
He was the Asian guy in that group.
Yeah.
And he has a picture of his grandfather on the
has
wall.
The medals
and I'm looking at that picture and I'm looking at the actor because the same actor.
Yes, the same actor.
And I'm like, that guy looks like the guy from the thing on the. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
It's like, wow, they even tied that in.
Oh yeah, one thing I want to mention about that is that in the comics they kind of bring the Howling Commandos into the modern day in like kind of a similar Captain America style. I kind of, in the back of my head, I kind of want that to happen just because I miss seeing like those characters because those are cool characters,
Well, the other thing is that near the end of the movie, we also get to see Pepper Potts come back into these films because she's been out for a while now of the films.
Yeah, I think there was like a contract issue she had with I think it was Civil War and for Avengers
something like
2.
that. And in theory, they get engaged and may possibly get married.
She just shot some scenes for Infinity War.
Oh, wow. Okay, so she's
I think I just
back.
saw that this morning.
So yeah, as a result of what happens at the end, I think they might be even getting married, her and Tony, because Tony offers Peter to come. Okay, I think you're ready for the team. Come to the team. Yeah. And Peter's like, nah, I think I'm going to stay and take care of my town type of thing. Yeah. He said, be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And then he was like, that's a test, right? He's like, yeah, of course it was a test. And then he's like, I don't think it was.
Crap,
like,
we gotta
give me the ring, give me something. I got to tell the news something because there's a whole press conference ready to. So that was kind of cute too. And you also have Happy Hogan, Tony's driver, in a lot of this film also because he's kind of like the in-between. He's kind of supposed to be keeping an eye on Peter.
He's like Peter's babysitter.
Right, but he's not watching him. He's too busy doing other stuff anyway.
He's just like, I don't have time for this.
Now, we also see one of the things that Happy was doing, he's part of the organizing and overseeing the moving, from the dismantling of the Avenger, the Stark Tower, into wherever the hell they're shipping them off upstate or something.
Yeah, it looks like they were going to the Avengers, like the complex that they have in
And
Civil
part
War.
of the climax of the film and the fight with Vulture has to do with the crashing of the plane that has all this tech that's being relocated. And we get to see a lot of all these weird things that are, I guess maybe we'll see them in the future having to do with other, Marvel Avenger related films. So we do get to see a lot of that too. And then, yes, at the end, we also get a peek at another Spider-Man suit that we haven't even seen what it does yet.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ever going to see it again because Spider-Man basically turned it down. Maybe we'll see it in Infinity War or something. But it looks like it's kind of a spin on the Iron Spider outfit, which we see in the actual Civil War comics that they did, where it's Iron Man specifically designs a suit for Spider-Man. And it's all gold and red and has spider legs too that come out of the back, like Doc Ock kind of. But in this version, it's just like a armor plated red and blue suit with a huge spider on the front, which it still looks cool. But you could tell they were kind of taking on the Iron Spider suit.
Yeah. Now, the final stinger that we get in the movie is basically a comedy thing in terms of it's another PSA from Captain America, but it's kind of towards the audience, saying, why are you guys sitting through all this and, watching all the way to the end? I appreciate it, Kind of, it was really silly.
Yeah, a lot of people on the internet were pissed off at that, which I was like, oh, come on, it's a joke. They gave you one scene.
Right, you don't have to, everything doesn't have to lead into the next thing with a huge surprise. No, you got enough. It's fine. It's no big deal.
Well, next is Thor Ragnarok, and that is supposedly, from what we're hearing, it's supposed to really like Infinity War is really, really close to Ragnarok.
They're getting closer and closer.
They're literally going to overlap or something. That's what I heard.
The only other theory that I've heard, that we talked a little bit about it before, and this one comes from, out of all people, Kevin Smith. He recently went on the internet just theorizing about what could they do in the future. Well, we all know that a lot of these actors' contracts are about to expire. Thor and Iron Man and Captain, all these actors, they're going to expire. There is a possibility, it is conceivable that because Peter Parker is kind of being mentored by Tony Stark, maybe Peter Parker eventually can take over for Tony. And that opens the door for the Morales situation to then him become the official Spider-Man at some point. Yeah. So that's a nice little theory.
Yeah, right now, from what we know about the contracts is that Thor's ends, I think, after Avengers 3. I don't think he's going to be back for the fourth one. And then Chris Evans said that he extended his thing for one more movie so that he could do Avengers 4. And then Robert Downey Jr. says, he said something to the lines of, I'll keep doing it until like before I make a fool out of myself. So he doesn't see an end in sight, I guess, at the moment. And then Tom Holland, he just started, so he still has, I told you, like 4 or 5 more movies left. And then there's still like the Guardians of the Galaxy. There's they have one more Guardians movie, and then they're both gonna do, I think, Avengers: Infinity War, and then they're gonna do the other Avengers movie. And then Doctor Strange just started, but I think they have like a 5-picture deal now.
Black
for
Panther
everybody.
is about to start.
Yeah, Falcon, I think they still have a couple movies with him, and Winter Soldier, they have a couple movies with him too.
And
Black Widow, I think she's still signed on.
And Captain Marvel hasn't even started yet.
No, but Nick Fury is going to be in Captain Marvel.
In Captain Marvel, they were saying.
So that's good.
So there's plenty to go around, you know. This is definitely a good addition to the Marvel Universe. Let's see what they do next. It's still making money, so, you know.
Yeah, hopefully what this will show Sony is that if they're going to do the Venom movie, if they're going to do their own movies without Marvel technically, they shouldn't do it unless they're going to link it with the MCU, because otherwise either it's not going to be a good movie, or even if it is a good movie, it's not going to make a lot of money for them, and it would be a waste of time.
Yeah.
Because you can't, like Venom, you can't have Venom without Spider-Man. That is ridiculous. If they don't at least reference that he exists, and they don't reference that the MCU exists, I'm okay if they don't really throw it in your face that much. I'm okay if it's like the amount that they put in Daredevil, honestly, where they just reference, the Battle of New York, and then the rest of the time they don't even bother with anything. That's fine. They have to acknowledge that there is a Spider-Man, you know?
Yeah, we'll see, because they can always...
And there has to be some sort of plan down the line to eventually have them cross over at some point.
It's such a wide array of mediums, between your television properties that they could easily jump to film. They're so good. Some of them are so good. I'm talking Daredevil. I'm talking Luke Cage. Heck, even Punisher.
I'm dying to see, because I have a bunch of comics where it's Spider-Man teams up with Daredevil, or Spider-Man teams up with or fights Punisher. And I really want to see something like that. Like, I hope what they do is with these other Spider-Man movies is that they make it like each movie they have a different team up. Like, because like this one would be like with Iron Man.
Yeah, why not?
And then maybe they could do the next one. Maybe they could have Daredevil. Like, that'd be cool.
Who knows?
It'd be a big stretch, but,
Well, this is definitely one we recommend. And like I said, if you're worried about the tone, this is a lighter tone than your darker, Marvel. I would kind of throw it into the Ant-Man and Guardians camp of you're slightly lighter. You can bring the younger kids, and it's okay.
Yeah.
I would say. All right, so go see it.
You can collect them all.
You are a toy!
Batteries not included.
Just get those wonderful toys.
Details on specially marked packages at participating stores.
Is that the $6 million man's boss?
It's Oscar Goldman.
Why do you have that?
That's worth a lot of money. That's much more valuable than Steve Austin.
Action figures each sold separately.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end.
Some assembly required.
All your favorite Star Wars heroes and villains. I have 3 of each. 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
On today's collectible segment, I'm going to begin with a new subject that I've never really had a chance to talk about in the past exclusively, and that is poster collecting. During my Orlando Celebration 2017, I attended many panels having to do with collecting, and one particular portion of the panel dealt with was poster collecting, but not so much the collecting aspects, but the forgeries. To be careful, with certain forgeries that are out there of very classic Star Wars related material to be careful with. And that kind of brought me back to not so much the forgery portion of the event, but the fact that I do own some pretty cool looking posters. I would probably say, as a kid, I probably purchased posters, all types of different type of posters, before I got a little more serious about it. And by that I mean with movies or even rock groups and stuff like that, they put out promotional posters you could buy at the store. You can go to your local Walmart or your local whatever store, and you usually have a poster rack. It's like a giant book with plastic covers, and you can kind of go through that giant book full of posters and select which number you want, and you buy them. And these are usually I don't want to say small, but they're kind of medium-sized posters. They're not exactly the ones you see at the movie theater. But then around, I think, let's say for the sake of argument, somewhere around 1982, 1981, especially 1982, I really started to kind of fall in love with the art of the posters, the actual movie one-sheet posters. And back then, I don't want to say a majority of them, but a lot of them, many of these poster art were usually derived from art. They were actually hand-drawn posters. There weren't too many, as they later started showing up, at least in my view, of the photographic posters. And keep in mind, this is before Photoshop and all that kind of stuff, when they could take photos and rearrange them in any shape or form that they wanted. I guess it's much easier, for an artist to just draw exactly what he wants and shift it around as need be. But granted, whether it's photographs or art, they would still most likely have to end up in a process where if changes needed to be made, they would have to cut out certain things and reposition them and rephotograph them and that sort of thing. As opposed to now where it's all done inside a computer. No matter what images you have, you can do whatever the heck you want. Nowadays, I don't even think many artists even draw with paper and pencil or inks or paints. They just use the paint programs in their software. I'm sure some of them still do. But anyway, back to 1982. I was living in New York, and one of the best things about living in a city like New York is having access to subways. The subway would take you, whether it's an underground subway or an elevated train, it would take you into Manhattan, out of Manhattan, into the other boroughs. And in all of the subway stations, specifically the indoor ones, the underground ones, they were completely plastered with ads on the walls, giant ads for whether it's merchandise material or movie. And I used to love seeing these movie posters. The size, they were actually even bigger, I believe, than your traditional one sheet, because the space that they were occupying in a subway station sometimes was much bigger than your typical, one sheet size. And whatever movie happened to be, playing at the time, it was being promoted, all over New York, and you could see them in all these train stations and all these subway stations. And sometimes you would even see like 5 of them in a row, all lined up. I guess it's their version of, when you watch a commercial on TV and then the same commercial plays again and you're like, wait, is this a mistake? No, it's not a mistake. They do it on purpose because they try to hit you twice. And that becomes a little more memorable. Obviously, you can't do that all the time with commercials, or else you would just lose your mind, every commercial being repeated twice. But with print ads, they would do that. They would put 5 or 6 in a row. And, I was already in the beginning stages of my fandom, if you will. I was already, Star Wars came out in 1977. That's what basically made my head explode, and progressed, especially after 1979, I think, when I first got here and I was completely bombarded by merchandising and all the different available things that a film would carry that you might be interested in. And in my case, I was definitely interested in. So at this time, the way that I would decorate my bedroom, obviously, is with traditional posters in them. But then when I started to catch on that they were actual movie posters out there, that people actually were able to get. And I remember my first try at trying to get a movie poster was that around the time where these movies would come out and the posters would be advertised, put on the walls of these subway stations, after a few weeks, as the movie is kind of leaving the movie theater, these posters get ripped down. They would get ripped down. And a lot of times they would already be kind of ungluing themselves or falling off. And I remember I was by some station and I noticed that the Raiders poster, this was 82, so this was the re-release of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I noticed the poster was starting to peel away, and I knew it was coming to the end of the run of this re-release. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to try to peel the rest of it off and take it with me. Unfortunately, well, thank God the cops didn't see me or anybody. Nobody cared at the time. But unfortunately, because these ads are usually mounted so much in terms of there's probably 10 or 15 other ads underneath. And I'm sure every now and then they have to scrape off all these different posters they put up so they can start fresh and put new posters again. This is back then when they used to do that. Well, anyway, I tried peeling off the poster and I basically destroyed it on the process. And I was very disappointed. And I'm like, what kind of cruel world do we live in with these posters are just plastered all over the subway station? Nobody appreciates them except for me. How do I get my hands on these? And then I started finding out. And I remember, no internet, 1982. Internet doesn't exist. My only source of information is either Starlog magazine or conventions. If by then I was already going to them, I honestly do not remember exactly if I was. So I would probably imagine Starlog magazine was my source of information at the time. In the back of the magazine, I believe, if I remember right, there were classifieds. And the classifieds were all over the place. And it was one page of classifieds. Half of them were probably Starlog related properties. The other ones were types of different toy collectible shops all over the country that would advertise on Starlog. And some of them were dinky little mom and pop shops, and some of them were a little more, explicitly large. Well, I believe I must have gotten the address for a poster place in Manhattan. So my dad, I think, took me. We took the train to Manhattan. It was somewhere downtown. It was a weird area because it was kind of like, it looked like a residential kind of area. But the poster store that sold posters was like a couple of steps down into almost like a basement type of store. It was a dinky little place. I guess, your typical Manhattan rents were outrageous even back then. But it was a dinky little place, not a lot of room to walk in, not a lot of room to really look. They didn't have too much of the display area because posters take up so much damn room. It is ridiculous. And, at the time I was thinking, well, I want to get a couple of posters for my room and no idea how much these things would cost. I remember originally I was thinking, well, maybe I can get the original Raiders poster, which is my all-time favorite, the one with Indy. He's kind of has the whip over his shoulder. It's a medium shot of him and very minimal additional art. And it says Raiders of the Lost Ark, from the makers of Jaws and Close Encounters and Star Wars or something like that. But I believe at the time when I asked about that poster, it was just way too expensive for me at that point. However, the re-release poster, the one that was in a lot of the subway stops that I was watching, that was because it was newer, it was cheaper, and it wasn't the original. And even back then, obviously, the collector market determines the price. That's the one I got. Therefore, that is the one that I'm starting this particular piece with, is my June poster. I know I'm putting it out a little later than expected, but what I've been doing lately is I've been unrolling all of my old 80s posters, and every month I'm going to display one in my office here for one of the posters. I have a couple of posters here in my office. Some of them kind of stay where they are, but I designated one of them that's going to be the interchangeable one every month. So for June, I picked Raiders of the Lost Ark. Again, this is the re-release poster by Richard Amsel, and you can see his name is usually on the lower hand, right-hand side. The man is no longer with us. He passed away years ago. But if you look at his website, www.richard-amsel.com, you are going to find a wealth of the history of film in terms of the many posters he's done. Some of them we might even touch upon in the future because I might own some of these other ones. Some of them I don't own, and some of them I think I'm going to have to start looking for because, my God, this guy, it's amazing the type of work he used to do. And like I said before, this is the type of stuff you used to see more in the past. Now the posters are way too more modern. Not a lot of people are into the, I don't want to call it old-timey, but it's a different type of era of poster making for movies. It's a different type of advertising. Nowadays, it's just different. Let me go into some of the earlier works that he's done. And if you can think of the poster for the movie, you might kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here. Now, granted, a lot of us are probably too young to even remember what the posters look like. And a lot of times, these posters don't necessarily carry on to whether it was VHS or DVD or Blu-ray. Many times, by the time it reaches the home video market, they use alternative art or something completely different. But every now and then they do carry over. But if you were to have gone to the movies at that time, that is the art, that is the poster that some of these artists, would have produced. Like I said, this man did stuff from the late 60s all the way to the mid-'80s. Let's see, I would say you guys probably would recognize Chinatown, the Jack Nicholson film. He did the poster for that. Papillon, the Steve McQueen movie. Murder on the Orient Express. Very timely movie to talk about now since they just remade it. Nashville, Death on the Nile, The Muppet Movie, which was unused. That's another thing. There are many times where these artists are hired, and they hire many artists, and then they select which ones they want to pick, but they still own the properties. The studios own it, and they do have, many unused posters by very famous artists that never see the light of day. They probably end up either on a website or on a book, art of so-and-so. Somebody like Drew Struzan, one of these giants of poster making, you will find that. Let's see, we also have Flash Gordon. God, that's one of my favorite fun movies. Guilty pleasure type of movies. He did the art for that poster. As I mentioned earlier, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He did both the original and the secondary one. The Dark Crystal, another wonderful movie that he did the art for. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. I mean, these are the movies we kind of grew up with, and you kind of get the feel of what we're talking about here in terms of his specific expertise, when it comes to art. Now, the Raiders posters, the particular history of those two Raiders posters are very interesting because obviously when the first poster was put together, they don't want to reveal too much on that poster. They want to kind of keep a little bit of a mystery about it. And the original one is still my favorite one because I just love the art that they did for it. It is just fantastic, beautiful looking. It's almost like a photograph, how well he managed to capture Harrison Ford's face. It is just, to me, it's perfect. It is probably the best drawing of Harrison Ford I've ever seen. Like I said, he's there holding the whip over his shoulder. I believe he might have used maybe the scene in the beginning of the movie when he's kind of coming out of the shadows into frame in the beginning, and you kind of see him, scraggly face, kind of serious looking. That, I believe, is the shot he's using for that reference, for that particular photo. You do have a very small, in that poster, him climbing down a rope and Marion in the bottom kind of holding off the snakes. And you do also see a truck on the other side, possibly a horse. Yes, you do see the horse kind of riding on the side, but not too much more. The only thing you see on that original poster is the Indiana Jones, the new hero from the creators of Jaws and Star Wars. That's all they give you at that time as far as your background. That is, like I said, my favorite one. That is the picture that they use on the soundtrack, which is another way of me having that poster in a very smaller manner. But the one that I purchased is the re-release, 1982. What makes this poster different is that because we already kind of know what this movie is all about, they are able to add a lot more art and specifically characters to it. The poster on the top, the little headline, it says, "The Return of the Great Adventure, Raiders of the Lost Ark." Now keep in mind, I mentioned this before, for a lot of the current Raiders-related or Indiana Jones-related material, in order to be able to put it into the franchise and to kind of categorize it, just like the future films were, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they gave them subtitles like that. What they've been doing a lot lately is they've been kind of rebranding Raiders of the Lost Ark to be Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I've seen that in novels. I believe they might have been doing it also on some DVD releases too. So it's funny because you don't get to see that kind of stuff anymore. The original title of the film, in a way. You kind of have to, they're kind of fudging with it a little bit. But anyway, this poster makes it different because you have now almost a 3/4 shot of Indy, and the whip is unfurled over his head. He's in the middle of kind of whipping it. He's kind of smiling straight at you. His likeness is a little different. I would compare it more to a animation or a cartoon or a comic book version of Indiana Jones as opposed to the previous one. The gruff on his face is almost completely gone. He looks very clean shaving a little more. He's definitely more in an action pose. So they kind of cleaned them up a little bit for this particular poster. Now, the thing that makes this poster also very different is that you do have basically all the leading characters in the film surrounding him in a kind of like in a U shape all along the edges of the poster. You have Belloc, you have Dietrich, the German lieutenant, I guess, the Nazi lieutenant. You have India Marion, tied to the post like which we get to see that at the end of the film, and there's like a snake all wrapped around those columns that all these pieces are being placed on. On the other side, you have the swordsman, that classic hilarious scene where Indy takes on the swordsman. You also have Belloc once again, but he's wearing now the turban from the end when they open the Ark, and his head is like, he's like holding his head because he can't believe what he's seeing. You have a nice clean shot of Marion on the right holding a torch from the Well of the Soul scene. And you also have on the left, I forgot to mention, Toth, the Nazi henchman, holding, I think he's holding a gun or a machine gun. I'm not entirely sure. But this is, I believe, a shot from the bar fight in Nepal in the beginning of the movie. Behind Indy, you have the Ark. You have a half shot, basically, behind Indy of the Ark. And again, these are things that probably, I imagine, they would want to kind of keep hidden from the original poster because I don't want to call they are sort of spoilers, I guess. They're not spoiling the story, but there are elements in the story that it kind of makes more sense to save for later. This is a re-release. They're urging people to return. You know, this is a time where movies would be re-released a year later, 2 years later, whatever, for limited engagement, you know, type of thing. The home video market was not in full assault as it is now. I don't even remember when it was the first time right now that you got Raiders of the Lost Ark available on video. So this is a different time, a completely different time. It's a great poster. Some people consider it one of Amsel's best posters. To me, again, I'm more of a fan of the original Raiders poster. But what's cool here is that if you go to this website I mentioned earlier, his actual website where you can see the history of a lot of his materials, they have a section where you can see the progression of how the posters came together. And this particular one, they go all through the process of him kind of drawing in on pencil, very rough looking with written little notes of, okay, we put this person here, we put that person there, we put this person here. And the progression of these little sketches that he was making before he settled on the last image. And then once he has that last image, you see, again, how the color is added, how he is kind of experimenting with the color and the placement of things. And then you have the final product there. According to the website here, Total Film in 2011 calls Raiders of the Lost Ark 1982, this particular re-release poster, the greatest hand-drawn movie poster of all time. I mean, like, man, that's some serious praise on this particular poster. Now, with Indiana Jones, there are many, many other posters out there that you might be able to find. A lot of them are only available in the foreign market in terms of they were used to promote the film in other countries. But that art sometimes does get used on other marketing aspects, whether it's toys or records or clothing or whatever it is that you're promoting. There's one additional poster that I've seen before, which is the Ark is up front center. And behind the Ark, you see Indy and Marion. Marion looks very different because her hair is different and she's wearing different kind of clothing. And the Ark is just shining, golden in the middle. And you do have some of the Nazis on the side and Indy on the horse and some other stuff. It's a repositioning of all of it. It looks completely different. It doesn't look so much pencil drawn and colored, but it's more like an oil painting, let's say, for example. And this particular poster is the one that I remember seeing it, and I actually do own it because of the album. If you guys remember, not the soundtrack, the album that kind of narrates the story when they have the story. Remember the story of Star Wars? Well, the story of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I have that album, and that is exactly the art they were using for that. That particular poster, as I mentioned before, is the type of poster they would have used in a foreign country, probably in Asia or even the Middle East. Sometimes they use that kind of art. The only other one I've seen somewhat repetitive here or there is one that is kind of white, and it's really weird in terms of it's got Indy. He's not even wearing the hat. He's not even wearing the jacket. The picture looks like Indy. It looks like Harrison Ford practicing with the whip. Doesn't even look like it's supposed to be the character. And I've seen this one again in some of the foreign markets in the re-releases. There are some bizarre, absolutely bizarre ones that you just cannot make heads or tails of why anybody would use it and why anybody would allow it to be used. I will post the link that I did include this particular story in an earlier post in our Facebook page. It's just amazing, some of these posters. The same thing happened with Star Wars. I remember we would talk about Star Wars and how they would you would just be completely baffled by what some of these foreign markets find acceptable as a means of advertising a movie. So, yeah, I would say those are it as far as the main ones. Now, when Raiders was re-released, I believe they did an IMAX presentation a couple years ago. It was like an anniversary type of thing. I believe the film might have been remastered and such. And this was, I believe, to coincide with the Blu-ray release. They did a combination of theatrical, IMAX, and, around the time the Blu-ray came out. Again, with the IMAX release, they designed a completely new poster, different artist, obviously. But if you are hunting for those original ones, I would say the first one and the second one are probably the most popular ones of all. Are you a genre TV, film, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, toy, and convention nerd?
Nerds!
Do you enjoy listening to podcasts?
It rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Do you ever wish you could co-host a podcast?
Mom!
Take it easy. Lower it.
I'm not going to lower it. I have to do this now.
I don't mind you playing it, but lower it.
This just might be your chance.
Somebody help me! Help me! Help me! Help me! Shut up!
GeekFest Rants is looking for new co-hosts. If you're interested, go to our homepage at geekfestrants.com and click on the hosting icon for more information. For our second collectible segment today, we are going to return to an old topic that we had started covering many, many months ago, and that is the Kenner Star Wars action figure line, the original Kenner Star Wars action figure line, and how it has progressed into all the different waves and all the different card backs from Star Wars to Empire. And now, finally, we are going to start with Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was the final film of the original trilogy that inspired the beginning of some of the best action figures that Kenner put together. As we mentioned before, as the line grew older and older, the better the figures got. And as you get to the tail end, the very, very tail end, which we will be discussing at a later episode of Return of the Jedi, the quality was amazing for that date's standards. We're talking about, the early to mid 80s here. With Return of the Jedi, you have the beginning of that wave, starting as early as 1982. And not only did it start early, but it started with a mail-away figure. What we're dealing with here is what we like to call the 65 card backs. By the time Return of the Jedi rolls around, we got quite a number of figures under our belt. And when you flip over your card of a carded action figure, you're going to be counting quite a number of figures. As this is happening, just like they did with The Empire Strikes Back, you're going to see some figures that will be recarded with the current movie's logo on it. So, for example, even during Empire, you were starting to see some older Star Wars figures recarded under the Empire logo. Same thing with Return of the Jedi. And that is obviously done because when people jump into a line for the first time, midstream, if you will, maybe they jump in at The Empire Strikes Back, or maybe they jump in at Return of the Jedi. All of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a minute, how do we get a Darth Vader? Well, Darth Vader was not part of the wave, of brand new figures having to do with Empire or Jedi. So they end up recarding them under the Jedi logo or an Empire logo. And sometimes they might even use a different picture. Not always, but sometimes. And then, bam, there you go. You have yourself your Darth Vader figure, for example. Well, with the 65 card backs, the Return of the Jedi line, your price now changes from the $249 to the $299, the most expensive that you have seen them at that time. You got to remember, they started off at $1.99, and to have to jump to $299, you're talking about over the span of these two films, rolling into the third film, your figures are costing about 33% more than they used to. But if you were the type of kid that saved your card backs and cut out the proofs of purchase, your first chance to get your hands on a Return of the Jedi action figure came in the form of a proof of purchase mail away. Here you have a 6 proof of purchase mail away for Admiral Akbar. Now, the 6 proofs of purchase is something new because up to this point, they were only doing 5 proofs of purchase for previous figures. So all of a sudden, now they wanted you to buy a couple more. But we all did. I believe that's how I got mine. And this is 1982 we're talking about. This is before the movie even comes out. You're starting to get the slow trickle of figures coming your way. The movie's coming out in May 25th, I believe, of 1983. So as early as 1982, probably the end of 82, you're starting to get something. So if you did your mail away, what you got is your Admiral Akbar, which comes with, now remember, again, this is Kenner we're talking about, a single accessory for the figure, and that is a baton, a black baton with these black rings around it. Kind of hard to say exactly where he uses it, if he does at all. I believe he uses some kind of pointing device, possibly when they're talking about the Death Star plans. Not sure how screen accurate this particular prop is, but it is an original prop. In other words, we have never seen it before, and that is one of the wonderful things about the Return of the Jedi line, is that new movie, new props, new accessories. And you do get quite a number of them. There are not too many variations when it comes to Admiral Akbar. You might get a slight tinge of different colors for the uniform, or maybe the paint application where the skin meets the sleeve might be a little overlapping or underlapping. Nothing major as far as variant collectors go. With that said, like I mentioned about a million times, you will find variants, and people are variant-focused collectors who will look for every conceivable variant to the figure. And this is applicable to just about every single figure. But for somebody like myself, my own sets of standards are variants. Where do I cross the line into variant world? For me, it's really not worth it with Admiral Akbar. Admiral Akbar later gets carded, and as I mentioned earlier, he becomes basically the first 65 card back figure. Beautiful card, beautiful picture from Return of the Jedi. We're sticking with the standard card formation, just the different colors and this and that and different pictures. So, pretty cool looking figure to start our line. With this mail-away figure, what you normally would get, and in most of these, this is what you end up getting, is a little white box with a bagged figure inside a baggie, and a catalog, a current catalog of whatever happens to be available at the time. And with this one, you also get this little note of who Admiral Akbar is. Now, because this came out in 82, they were not heavily promoting Return of the Jedi yet. And keep in mind, this was called Revenge of the Jedi. That's the other thing that's very interesting about this figure, is that when it was advertised on Empire Strikes Back cards with a little sticker that said, mail away for this first figure from Revenge of the Jedi, that is something that's cool if you happen to have some of those card backs that actually have the word revenge on it. It is something that is sought after and a collectible. Admiral Akbar, I remember, also was one of those kind of sneak peek pictures, as I always preface most of these conversations. This is pre-internet. So I remember that in I forget which version of 1982, Bantha Tracks, one of the first pictures of Revenge of the Jedi was a tiny little square monochrome photo of Admiral Akbar sitting in his chair and, in his cruiser. And that was like, wow, we actually get to see an actual picture of Revenge of the Jedi. So, it was a big deal. The other thing to keep in mind is that the catalog that was included in the mail-away was a Empire Strikes Back catalog, because at that point, they didn't want to release too much information about what was coming. They wanted to keep you in the dark because it was still 1982, and this was your sneak preview kind of figure. They weren't calling it a sneak preview, I think, but it amounts to that basically. It's the look what's coming kind of figure. Now, your second 1982 figure was Lando in his skiff guard disguise. Now, he came with an accessory that was called the Skiff Guard Vibro Axe. This is an unusual weapon. Again, manufactured for Return of the Jedi. We see it in the movie. We never really see what makes it special or what makes it a vibro axe. It's supposed to be some kind of blade weapon. However, because it's kind of futuristic technologically, you can't just have a knife because that's kind of simple. To make it futuristic, they call it a vibro axe. So I guess it's supposed to have a blade that vibrates as it's cutting into someone, Obviously, in the movie, we never really see that technology. They're all carrying their weapons. Even the Gamorrean guard has this huge, big, fat axe, and it's supposed to be a vibro axe. So it's like, okay, I guess there's some kind of technology going on here that I don't understand. And, instead of him just carrying a big stick or a big spear, he gets to carry this thing, which is cool, and a number of them carry it. Now, what's also really cool about this figure is that it has a removable helmet. Removable helmets are something new to the Return of the Jedi line. We didn't have any before. So what you have here is a slightly smaller sculpted Lando head so that you can then fit his special, Jabba Palace helmet on him, and you can kind of still see his eyes just like you did in the movie. The helmet does not have the mouthpiece that kind of raises and lowers. It's just one big piece with, the hole in the middle and, for the eyes. But it is cool that, they're putting the time and they're putting the effort into making these a little more modern, a little more sophisticated in their design. The variations, again, slight color variations on the costume, on the flesh tone, that sort of thing. No major differences this time around with the Lando figure with his teeth. Remember in Empire Strikes Back, there was a major variant where with teeth, without teeth. Big old grin or no grin kind of look. Here they just went with no teeth. You don't see teeth. He's serious, looking, that sort of thing. Very cool looking figure. Now, as 1983 rolls in, we get another mail-away figure. This time it's Nien Nunb. For this figure, which is a completely new alien, just like Akbar, it's like, oh my God, what is he all about? You did have, once again, the option of mailing away for him. You could have gotten him through the mail. Similar scenario to Admiral Akbar. You get your figure in a little baggie in a little white box. You get an introductory little letter, and you get a catalog. However, this time around, it's a Return of the Jedi catalog. Now you're getting a peek at what's coming, down the line, just like you do with the card back for Lando. This is still part of the 65 backs. Difference is that for the proof of purchases, here they kind of went back to the 5 proofs of purchase, so they weren't asking for as many as 6 this time. So I don't know if that was just a cash grab that they were trying to get you to buy one more figure with Akbar, but with Nien Nunb, they kind of backed off a little bit, and that's kind of good. Great looking figure. His face sculpt is really cool because he's got those flaps in his mouth. His flight suit, pretty accurate to what what we're used to. And he comes with a pilot blaster that is basically the same one as that we had seen before, the TIE Fighter pilot in the Empire line. And like I said, just before, just like with Akbar, this was also eventually a carded figure. Up next, we have Bib Fortuna, Jabba's manservant, if you will. Here's an elaborate looking figure. Not only do you get the creepy face with the tendrils and the back of the head that wrap around his body, the figure comes in a cloak, a soft good cloak. And by soft goods, I'm talking about not like in Star Wars where if somebody had a robe or a cloak or something, it was made out of plastic, like the Jawa plastic robe or the Obi-Wan plastic robe or the Leia plastic robes they put on her. Here now, they are going into soft good territory, which, to be fair, they did dabble a little bit in Empire Strikes Back with Zuckuss and in Star Wars, if you will, with the soft good Jawa, the soft good Cape Jawa, made out of cloth as opposed to the vinyl one, the rare one. However, for those two lines, they've only really had, like I said, maybe 2 figures. I guess you can also count the Ugnaught from Empire. He had a little, like a vest, like a tunic, a cloth tunic, and Yoda, of course, yeah, let's not forget Yoda. Yoda did have a soft good coat. But what I'm saying here is that with Return of the Jedi, it looks like they're trying to experiment with different material. For Empire, for example, the Zuckuss that I was talking about, he has kind of like a leathery feel kind of coat. Here for Bib Fortuna, he has a kind of like a suede coat, which is very unusual. I mean, I don't remember exactly if in the movie, his coat is made out of suede or something like that, but that's what they decided to use for here. Obviously, his figure has many robes. It's a multi-layer robe that the character wears. The inside is all plastic, but the outer coat is the suede one I'm talking about. He also seems to have this very elaborate belt, chest plate type of thing that attaches. It's made out of plastic, so it's like an accessory, if you will. And he carries a staff, which I'm pretty sure he carried something at some point during the movie. Just like anything else, you might have some variations in the painting and the paint application. The other thing I noticed is that, and again, it depends on how crazy of a variant collector you are. If you collect the Lily Letty figures, the Mexican ones, there is apparently a major cloak color variation where the cloak is more reddish than this one, which is kind of greenish, like a dark greenish. So there is that kind of variation, but I've never really seen one in person. All right, then we have the Biker Scout, also known as the Scout Trooper. This is a beautiful figure. I absolutely love it. I remember seeing it on display at the store and how, especially with Return of the Jedi, I mean, this happened to me also with The Empire Strikes Back, but Return of the Jedi is a little more current, only by a few years, where I do remember looking at these cards and it's like, wow, in your mind, you're trying to decipher the stories based on one single picture, one frame next to the action figure. And this one, I remember, it's the Biker Scout kind of hunched over the bike, almost in a ready-to-go position. The figure it's just gorgeous. It's a beautiful, gorgeous figure. It's an amazing likeness of the armor that the Biker Scout wears. His accessory is that small pistol. Again, it's a completely original pistol. It's a blaster pistol that I remember he carries in his leg, on the bottom part of his leg, as he's chasing Luke and Leia around. The figure comes in a certain way, and this is something you really can't get too crazy on because he has to have dual purpose. He comes in a certain way where his legs are pretty straight and his arms are kind of pretty straight, very slight, if almost non-existent bend on the elbows. And that is purposely done because he is supposed to be able to fit into the accessory that is the bike, the actual bike for the Biker Scout. I remember, I have it. So you could sit him on the bike with his arms stretched out holding the handles, more or less. And he should be able to do that. The only variation I'm aware of, because this is a black and white figure, there's not a lot of combinations that you can mess around with, and that is the visor, the actual eye goggles. Some of them are thicker, more black, and some of them are thinner, a little less black in there. That seems to be like one of the most common variations that you might be able to find. Okay, then we have Chief Chirpa, our first Ewok. Now, with the Ewoks, they all come with different accessories, which is cool. And again, just like the Biker Scout, these are original accessories we've never seen before. They're not recycling from something else. Chief Chirpa comes with a hood that he can place over his head. It's made out of rubber. And a staff that he can hold. He's painted, pretty good for what it is. He's got a sort of like a painted on belt and a hanging necklace. And, the eyes and the teeth are painted. So this is something that we're going to see in different shapes or forms with all the different Ewoks that they put out there. They choose to paint certain things and not others. This one, you do get to see very prominent those teeth sticking out. Now, what is very interesting about this particular Ewok is that if you were to look at the back, the card back of other figures, you would not be able to see him because they purposely airbrushed out his picture and another Ewok during that first wave. And that is because they didn't want you to see the Ewoks because those were supposed to be a surprise for, I guess, the viewers, especially the children. So I do remember the first wave of card backs, you would flip them over and you see these big black blotches. And it's funny because I do remember if you hold them to the light in a certain way, even though it's still a big black blotch, you could still see the outline of something else underneath that big black blotch. and it was the silhouette of an Ewok. So you can kind of tell what the creature they're hiding kind of looks like, but not entirely. But I do remember seeing those, and I remember at the time I wasn't sure, why are they doing that? Why are they, does that mean this figure is not for sale, or what was the deal? But yeah, I remember that was something they were doing at first. Next, the Emperor's Royal Guard. Once again, another amazing looking figure. You have soft goods for the cloak. You have this beautiful red helmet, and underneath an even darker red, crimson-y kind of tunic that the guy is wearing. And he's holding a force pike, which is this long spear-like device that it's kind of very hard to find on the second market, and it took me so many years to find the replacement one. This is another great figure. Like I said, totally original. The use of the soft goods that are non-removable. I mean, you could forcefully remove them, but they're really not meant to be removed from the figure. And it's two layers of cloaks. And the force pike, which makes him look really, really screen accurate. Definitely one of the best ones. And like I said earlier, these things kept getting better and better as they went along. The Royal Guard is also one of these characters that in the movie you're like, You look at these pictures and you actually see them in the trailer a little tiny bit. And it's one of these underused characters that you hoped that they would have done so much more with, but they never did. Okay, Gamorrean Guard. Here we go. Here's another great creature that they put together. A completely new mold. It's a much bigger mold than you've ever seen before. The pig-like snout and the teeth and the horns. And his accessory is the vibro axe, like I mentioned earlier. It looks just like an axe. You've seen it in the movie. Again, I don't even remember seeing anything special about it, anything technological about it. Who the heck knows? Who cares? Great figure. The sculpt is great. You can see his toes. You can see his muscles. It's really a cool-looking interpretation of the original character. One little tidbit about this character is that when the Star Wars line was starting to die off and other lines came about, Kenner repurposed parts of some of these Star Wars figures. And this one in particular, the Gamorrean Guard, parts of him became Friar Tuck in the Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves line of toys. They basically took his legs, I believe, and part of his chest and a little bit of his arms. Obviously, they changed the head. But when you take a close look at some of these body parts, like I said, the legs and the chest and the belly area, they just did not change almost anything. They used it almost completely. They just recolored it. So it's an interesting little tidbit when it comes to how some other licensees ended up repurposing Star Wars. General Madine. General Madine is a pretty basic looking character as far as action figures go. Nothing too exciting about him. He's a rebel general, so it's nice to kind of, I don't want to say army build because he is a specific character. He's not a soldier, so you really can't. But I know, people have used a lot of loose Madines to customize other figures and that sort of thing. He comes with what's described as a battle staff, which is really, again, another pointing device, I think, similar to what Akbar had. This one, it is completely original. It's a white kind of a stick with a head on it. Really cool colors for it being such a simple, uniform. But I like the combination of the blues and the grays. Very navy-ish looking rebel outfit. Very minor paint variations, just like with everything else. Nothing too excited about Madine. Somewhat of an underused character, but hey, he got some airtime and he got some lines, so that's cool. Okay, now we have Klaatu, better known as Wolf. Now, what is the deal with Klaatu? There seems to be some inconsistencies with naming here. Not as crazy, maybe, as what happened with Empire Strikes Back and Zuckuss and Forlom, but something to that extent where this guy's name is Klaatu. However, when all the reference material was put out, his actual name should have been Wolf. W-O-O-O-F. He comes with the same vibro axe that Lando comes with. He is obviously a plastic figure, but he does have a soft good attachment. It's kind of like a half skirt, almost like a lion cloth, if you will. It covers the front and part of the back. Part of it is leather. The other one is like fur, like sheepskin maybe or something like that. Again, he's one of Jabba's thugs, during the Pit of Carkoon, I believe, and some of the interior stuff too. Then we have Logray, another Ewok. This is the Medicine Man Ewok. Different color than our previous one. He's a much lighter color. His accessories are, he has a hood. He has a helmet type of thing that he wears, like a skull with leather on it. He has a little pouch bag that he kind of can loop over his shoulder with a strap. And he has a staff with bird feathers and all kinds of little intricate little knickknacks. Again, this was another one of these first wave figures that were airbrushed so you couldn't see what they looked like. Good addition to the Ewok troop builders, I guess. Next up, you have Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight outfit. Very nice sculpt, very nice proportions. The head might be a little too big, just slightly too big, but you get a great soft good cloak with a hood that he can wear. You get one of the Jabba's Palace blasters, which is a completely new sculpt of weapon for the Return of the Jedi line. And he gets a green separate lightsaber. Remember, by this time, they finished off doing the lightsabers in the arms. By Empire, they had switched over to the handheld separate lightsaber. Fortunately, they hadn't gotten the colors right. Well, finally, we get one that actually comes with the right color. This is a nice green lightsaber that you could use for the Luke figure. There are apparently a few people that were able to get a alternate color lightsabers. Apparently some came with a blue color lightsaber, which is, again, inappropriate because he never has blue in Return of the Jedi. Blue was from Empire. Ironically, blue is also the color that they didn't get right with Empire because they gave Luke a yellow removable lightsaber in Empire, which, you know, I guess it's about baby steps. You make the corrections a little bit at a time, but at least this time he gets the right one. But yes, there are some blue ones floating around too, for some bizarre reason. Then you have Princess Leia as Boushh, the bounty hunter Boushh. Again, completely new sculpt, very screen accurate depiction of her. Comes with a removable helmet. Her head is pretty small to begin with, so it does help in being able to put the helmet over her head. Works really well. And she also carries what you could see it as a gun. It's a very long staff-looking device, which he is carrying, in the movie. And he kind of holds it like a staff. But here, it looks like it's got a handle. So it looks like to be a very long, super long rifle or a staff with a very unusual handle off to the side. You have to figure out which way to carry it. Let's put it that way. I'm sure in the EU, or even maybe in the props, you might be able to find exactly how it is supposed to be used or handled. But in the movie, she's only carrying it as a staff. And here, it comes with it. Again, completely original. Never done before. And yet, another helmeted action figure that we've introduced into the line. Up next, we have the Rebel Commando. Speaking of army building, here's your chance to collect a couple of Rebel Commando figures. He's not anyone specific. This way you could, I guess, army build. All green from Endor. Comes with the Endor type of helmet. Non-removable. This is a non-removable helmet. And a completely original rifle with a strap. Blaster rifle that we've never seen before. It's just incredible how good these things were getting, as I mentioned before. And how they kind of go out of their way to give you newer accessories. Not only great sculpts and coloring, but newer accessories, which is great. Then you have Ree-Yees, the three-eye, I don't know if you want to call it piggish-looking creature. Again, from Jabba's palace. He's got a couple of shots here or there. Very original looking, great sculpt. The three-eye look works really well. The coloring of the costume is really cool. Bizarre looking weapon with this one. Again, completely original, gold color. I doubt we've seen it in the movie. But yeah, they went completely original. It's amazing because, again, you have such a unimportant character that never even seems to be holding a weapon as far as I can remember, and them being nice enough to give you something completely new. Now, speaking of creatures, up next we have Squidhead. Squidhead. Well, Squidhead, again, similar to like Ree-Yees, he has a very small part, and he's one of these background creatures. He does have a accessory blaster, which is a repurposed, I believe, Bespin blaster. If you remember the Empire Bespin blasters, well, that's what he's holding, except this one is colored gray. The Bespin ones were usually like a dark blue, but here they went with a gray color. So finally, at this point, they're repurposing older blasters. He has a lot of interesting clothing accessories, soft good cape, soft good kind of like a skirt, and a belt, a very thick belt also, very thick plastic belt. Great looking figure. The sculpt is gorgeous. The head, it's all in the head. How good they did it to resemble the on-air, a creature. And finally, we have Weequay. This is another one of Jabba's henchmen. This one comes with a vibro axe, again, similar to Lando. This particular guy, what makes him a little different than most of the other ones is that he has his arms and hands molded in a certain way where he can hold the vibro blade with both hands into a carrying motion. And if you guys remember, this is the guy that pokes Luke in the back as he's walking the plank, and then Luke does the flip and kind of goes after him and that sort of thing. Well, that's one of the things you can do with this figure is you can actually pose him in that fashion to be able to hold, his weapon forward, which is something they don't do a lot. They don't do a lot of posing, because they want you to have all the possible combinations. And to have one hand down and one hand up, that could limit, your playability, I guess. But in this particular case, they chose to, take it a step further and give you that little extra bonus feature, if you will. So that's going to wrap things up for our first wave, or at least the beginning of our first wave of Return of the Jedi. Next time we cover this subject, we're going to explore it a little deeper because we have a little more of what you could still consider first waves, and then we have second waves, and we have third waves, and we have Power of the Force. And eventually we're going to go with the odds and bits. We're going to end up doing a little piece on the odds and bits, all these weird little other figures that are not exactly figures, but creatures and that sort of thing. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this, and we will see you next time with more of our Kenner Star Wars original action figures. All right, I'd like to thank you guys for listening. I hope you've enjoyed all of our movie reviews today with Spider-Man Homecoming and our new feature having to do with movie posters. As I mentioned earlier, I hope to be able to put one up every month and talk about them for you guys to maybe even get into collecting old posters. And I also hope you enjoyed our Return of the Jedi Kenner action figure look back from our childhood toys, which don't seem to be leaving me. They seem to be continuing the longer we progress here. As usual, I'd like to thank you guys. I'd like to thank Kyle for helping me put together the Spider-Man review. And until next time, we will see you here at GeekFest Rants. Goodbye, everybody.
The Force is back. The rebels won't tire till they see the last of the Empire. And Kenner's there with Star Wars Return of the Jedi collection.
I'm gonna feed you to Sarlacc pit, Skywalker.
Klaatu, Weequay, Luke Skywalker, and Lando Calrissian, each sold separately.
Prepare the plank, Weequay. Surprise, surprise, I'm Lando in disguise. Let's get out of here, Luke. Whoa, the plank is falling. Help!
Klaatu, Weequay, Luke Skywalker, and Lando Calrissian action figures, each sold separately from Kenner's Star Wars Return of the Jedi collection.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Perone, copyright 2017.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.